The front door swung open, and Margot stood there frozen like someone had just slapped her across the face. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Behind her, the late afternoon sun painted everything gold, but her expression was pure shock. She'd been gone 2 weeks. 2 weeks of luxury resorts and spa treatments and Instagram stories. 2 weeks of leaving her 5 children with me because, in her words, I didn't do anything anymore. I was just a retired woman with too much time and not enough purpose. But what she saw now wasn't what she expected. Not even close. The living room hummed with life. Her oldest son, Elliot, was showing his siblings a wooden bird he'd carved himself. The twins were setting up a miniature stage from cardboard boxes. Even little Tess, who'd arrived with jam stuck to her face and tears in her eyes, was laughing as she arranged paper boats along the mantel. The house smelled like fresh bread and wood polish. Sir Fluffington, the neighbor's cat, was curled on the rug. Handmade decorations covered the walls. The children's artwork hung with care. Mended jackets. Mixing bowls from this morning's baking lesson. Signs of real, messy, beautiful life everywhere. "Mom," Margot said, her voice cracking. "What did you do?" I smiled. Not the big, forgiving smile I'd given her for years. This was different. This was the smile of a woman who'd just taught a lesson without raising her voice once. "I watched them," I said simply. "Like you asked." She stepped inside, heels clicking like little hammers. Her perfect mask was slipping. She'd expected a grandmother who'd survived chaos and was desperate to hand the kids back. Instead, she found children who didn't want to leave. "Grandma taught me to fix Soren's bike," Elliot said, pride in his voice. "She showed me how to take responsibility when I messed up. She didn't just yell. She made me think." Margot's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "You let them do crafts? You made bread? With gluten?" "They're children, Margot," I said quietly. "Not robots." The twins ran over, squealing about Sir Fluffington and tonight's play. They wrapped around my legs like I was home base. When they noticed their mother, they waved but didn't let go of me. That's when I saw it. The moment Margot realized she'd made a mistake. Not just in how she'd spoken to me on that phone call 2 weeks ago, the one where she announced she was dumping her kids because I didn't do anything anymore. This was bigger. Her children had found something here they weren't getting at home. "I need to talk to you," she said, voice tight. "Alone." "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. But lessons don't work if you rush them." Margot wanted answers now. She wanted to know what magic trick I'd pulled to turn her children against her. She didn't understand it wasn't magic. It was time. Attention. Care, without conditions. I'd spent 2 weeks with these kids. 2 weeks starting with chaos, cereal in sinks, lipstick on walls, tears over cup colors. But Margot's careless words had lit something in me. She'd called me useless. Empty. Nothing left to give. So I decided to teach her exactly how wrong she was. Not with words or arguments. Those fade fast. I'd teach her the way I taught English literature for 40 years, by showing, not telling. What Margot didn't know was the lesson was just beginning. 2 days before she came home, she'd made a mistake. A big one. She'd posted a video online. And that video was about to teach her something I never could have planned. What would you do if someone disrespected everything you'd worked for? Would you fight back or teach them a lesson they'd never forget? Let me take you back to where this all started. 3 weeks before Margot stood in my doorway, looking like her world had flipped upside down. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning that makes retirement feel like a gift from God himself. Sun streaming through my kitchen windows. Birds arguing in the hydrangeas. My tea still warm in the cup. I had nowhere to be and nothing urgent calling my name. 43 years I'd spent teaching English literature to teenagers who thought Shakespeare was a waste of time. 43 years of lesson plans and parent conferences and grading papers until my eyes burned. I'd earned this quiet. I'd earned the right to sit in my kitchen and do absolutely nothing, if that's what I wanted. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer it. "Mom, it's Margot," my son Harlan said before I even got the receiver to my ear. His voice had that apologetic tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. The tone that meant his wife was about to ask for something. "Put her on, dear," I said, already feeling that little twist in my stomach. There was a click, a breath. Then Margot's voice, flat as roadkill. "I'm dropping off my 5 kids with you tomorrow. You don't do anything anymore, so you can watch them while I travel." Not a question. Not a request. A statement. Like she was telling me the weather forecast or what she'd ordered for lunch. My hand tightened on the phone. "Excuse me?" "My trip to Cabo. 2 weeks. Harlan can't get off work, and the kids need supervision. You're retired. You've got the time." Something cold slid down my spine. Not anger yet. Something older and quieter than anger. "Margot, I'll email you their schedules. Elliot has soccer on Thursdays. The twins need to be at school by 8:15 sharp. Tess is still in diapers sometimes, so watch that. And please, Mom, no junk food. I have them on a very specific diet." She kept talking. Kept listing demands like I was the help she'd hired off some website. Not once did she ask if I was available. Not once did she say please or thank you or acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, I had my own life. I looked out at my garden, at the roses I'd planned to prune this week, at the easel set up on the back porch where I'd been teaching myself to paint again, at the life I'd carefully built for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. "You don't do anything anymore." Her words hung in the air like smoke. And that's when something inside me shifted, snapped, realigned itself into something sharp and clear. I smiled. A small, private smile she couldn't see through the phone. "I'll be here," I said, voice soft as cotton. Then I hung up. Harlan called back 10 minutes later, stammering apologies. "Mom, I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have," I tried to tell her. "It's fine, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Because right then, standing in my kitchen with sunlight warming my shoulders, I'd made a decision. Margot thought I was empty, used up, a woman with nothing left to offer except free babysitting. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happened next changed everything. Margot arrived the next evening in a whirlwind of designer luggage and entitlement. She swept through my front door like she owned the place, sunglasses perched on her head, even though the sun had already set. The kids tumbled in behind her like refugees from a war zone. Elliot came first, 13 years old, all sharp elbows and slouched shoulders. He dropped his backpack on my clean floor and didn't bother picking it up. His eyes were glued to his phone screen, thumbs moving like he was defusing a bomb. Then Pippa, the 10-year-old, smart as a whip and twice as cutting. She looked around my living room with the kind of judgment usually reserved for restaurant reviews. "It smells like old people in here," she announced. The twins, Jonah and Percy, were 4-year-old tornadoes in matching superhero shirts. They immediately started fighting over who got to sit in the armchair by the window. Their voices hit frequencies that could shatter glass. And finally, little Tess, 2 years old, thumb in her mouth, jam smeared on her cheek like war paint. She took one look at me and started crying. "They're a handful," Margot said, not looking at me. She was too busy checking her phone, scrolling through something that made her smile. "But you'll figure it out. You raised Harlan, didn't you?" She said it like raising one child 30 years ago automatically qualified me to handle 5 kids with 0 notice. "Here's their schedule." She thrust a paper at me. The thing was 3 pages long, printed in 8-point font. "Elliot's soccer practice is Tuesday and Thursday at 4. Don't be late, Coach Henderson hates that. Pippa has piano on Wednesdays. The twins have a playdate Friday afternoon with the Morrison kids. Make sure they don't eat before that. Sharon Morrison gets weird about snacks. I scanned the list. Dietary restrictions. Bedtime routines. Screen time limits. Approved snack brands. It read like a military operation manual. And Mom, Margot finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard. Don't let them watch anything I wouldn't approve of. No sugar after 6. And please try to keep the house clean. I know you're used to living alone, but kids are messy. Used to living alone. Like I was some hermit who'd forgotten how civilization worked. Harlan stood in the doorway, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Mom, if this is too much. It's fine, I said. My voice was steady. Calm. I even smiled. Margot kissed Harlan goodbye, one of those stiff pecks that looked like duty, not affection. Then she was gone, heels clicking down my driveway, engine starting, taillights disappearing into the dark. The door closed. Silence fell for exactly 3 seconds. Then Tess screamed. Jonah pushed Percy off the armchair. Pippa announced she was hungry, but nothing here looks edible. Elliot didn't even look up from his phone. I stood in my living room, my peaceful, quiet living room, and watched chaos unfold like a bomb going off in slow motion. This was what Margot thought I deserved, what she thought I was good for. Free labor while she sipped cocktails on a beach somewhere. The twins were now wrestling on the floor. Tess's crying had reached opera levels. Pippa was opening my kitchen cabinets and making disgusted noises. Elliot finally glanced up, saw the disaster around him, and went right back to his phone. I could have lost it right then. Could have called Harlan and told him to turn his wife around and come get these kids. Could have spent 2 weeks in survival mode, counting down the hours until Margot returned. But I didn't. Because I'd already decided something the moment I hung up on Margot yesterday. I wasn't going to just survive these 2 weeks. I was going to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Not through punishment, not through cruelty, but through something much more powerful. I was going to show her what real parenting looked like. But here's what I didn't know yet. Margot had already made a decision about me too. And that decision was about to blow up in her face in ways neither of us could have predicted. The first morning started at 5:45 with blood-curdling screams. I jolted awake thinking someone was being murdered, threw off my blankets, ran down the hall in my nightgown and bare feet, heart pounding, ready to call 911. The twins were fighting over cups. Blue cup versus green cup. World War III over pieces of plastic. He got the blue one. Jonah shrieked, face red as a tomato. I wanted blue. Percy wailed back, tears streaming. They were both screaming at volumes that shouldn't be physically possible from such small bodies. Tess, awakened by the chaos, started crying in sympathy. Within minutes, all 3 of them were sobbing like their world had ended. Elliot appeared in the doorway, looked at the situation, and went back to bed. Pippa wandered in, assessed the scene with the cold efficiency of a general surveying a battlefield, and said, "They do this every morning. Mom usually gives them both blue cups." "She has 2 blue cups?" I asked. "No. She just tells them they're both blue even when one's green. They're too stupid to notice." That's when I realized what I was dealing with. These weren't bad kids. They were kids who'd been managed instead of raised, handled instead of taught. By 8 o'clock, I'd negotiated a ceasefire with the twins, changed Tess 3 times, and discovered that Elliot expected me to drive him to school even though the bus stop was 2 blocks away. "Mom always drives me," he said, not looking up from his phone. "I'm not your mom, and you have legs." He stared at me like I'd suggested he walk to Canada. Pippa dumped an entire box of cereal into the sink because, in her words, this brand tastes like cardboard and sadness. By 9 o'clock, I'd cleaned cereal out of my sink, mediated another twin argument, this time over who got to wear the red shirt, and discover that Tess had found my lipstick and decorated the hallway wall like it was the Sistine Chapel. By 10 o'clock, I was ready to quit. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by chaos, and thought about Margot's words. You don't do anything anymore. This. This was what she thought was nothing. This was what she dismissed as easy, because I didn't have a real job anymore. I could have cried. Could have called Harlan and begged him to fix this. Could have survived by parking them in front of screens and counting down the days. But that's not who I am. 43 years of teaching didn't just evaporate because I'd retired. I knew how to handle chaos. I knew how to turn disorder into opportunity. I just had to remember. That afternoon, after lunch, which involved another battle over food brands and textures, I sat them all down in the living room. New rules, I said. My teacher voice. The one that made teenagers shut up and listen. Elliot didn't look up from his phone. I walked over and held out my hand. Phone. What? Phone. Now. You can't. I can. And I am. You'll get it back after dinner if you've earned it. His face went through 5 stages of grief in 3 seconds. But something in my voice, maybe the steel I'd used on countless students, made him hand it over. Pippa smirked. Harsh, Grandma. You're next. Kitchen. You're going to help me make dinner. I don't cook. You do now. The twins stopped mid-argument to stare at me. Tess, sensing the shift in power, went quiet. This was the moment. The moment I decided to stop managing and start teaching. Stop surviving and start shaping. These kids weren't broken. They were bored. Understimulated. Raised on schedules and screens and brand name everything instead of real life. Well, real life was about to show up. Because what I did next turned everything upside down. And by the end of that first week, these kids would be different. Margot just didn't know it yet. By the end of week 1, something had shifted. You could feel it in the house like weather changing. Elliot still tested me. Every single day. He'd sleep through his alarm, then expect me to drive him to school. He'd leave dishes in the sink. He'd try to sneak his phone back from the drawer where I'd locked it. But I'd been dealing with teenage boys since before he was born. I knew the game. You want your phone back? Earn it. Wash the dishes. Walk the twins to the park. Show me you can handle responsibility. The first time, he rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd fall out of his head. But he did it. Grudgingly. Sloppily. But he did it. Pippa was trickier. That girl had a sharp tongue and 0 filter. Everything was beneath her. Everything was stupid or boring or not how mom does it. So, I gave her a challenge. You think you're so smart? Prove it. Help me fix this broken shelf in the garage. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. I don't know how to fix things. Then learn. We spent an afternoon in the garage with tools and wood and frustration. She stripped 3 screws before getting 1 right. But when that shelf finally held weight, when she stood back and saw something she'd built with her own hands, her whole face changed. I did that, she whispered. You did. The twins were easier than I expected. Turns out, when you stop negotiating with terrorists and just set firm rules, 4-year-olds fall in line. Same bedtime, every night. Same routine. No exceptions. They tested me exactly once. A double tantrum that shook the windows. I let them scream, sat in my chair with my tea, and waited them out. 20 minutes later, they were quiet, exhausted, looking at me like they'd just discovered I was made of steel. You done? I asked. They nodded. Good. Now, let's read a story. And Tess. Sweet, sticky Tess. That little girl had been crying for her mother since the moment Margot left. She clung to me like a barnacle, thumb permanently in her mouth, eyes always on the verge of tears. So, I did what I should have done from the start. I held her, not to stop the crying but to let her know crying was okay. That missing your mother wasn't weakness. I rocked her in my chair by the window, sang her old songs my own mother had sung to me. Let her be sad without trying to fix it. By day 5, she started smiling. By day 7, she laughed. The real turning point came on Saturday afternoon. Rain was hammering the windows. The kids were restless, bored, driving each other crazy. "Grandma, can we watch TV?" Pippa asked for the 100th time.
No.
"Why not?" "Because we're going to put on a play." 5 blank stares. "A what?" Elliot asked. "A play. A performance. We're going to write it, build sets, make costumes, and perform it. Right here in the garage." "That's so lame," Pippa started, but I saw the spark in her eyes. "Then make it not lame. You're the director." That's all it took. Give kids ownership. Give them purpose. Give them something real to create. We spent the entire afternoon building a stage from cardboard boxes, making costumes from old sheets and safety pins, writing a ridiculous story about pirates who learned kindness instead of treasure hunting. The twins became pirates with eye patches made from construction paper. Tess was the sea monster, mostly because she just wanted to roar and chase people. Elliot surprised me by getting into it, building elaborate ship railings from garage scraps. Pippa directed everyone with the iron fist of a Hollywood producer. By evening, we had a show. A messy, chaotic, beautiful show. They performed it for me in the garage. I recorded it on my phone. Watched these 5 kids, who'd arrived as strangers throwing tantrums, work together like they'd been doing it for years. When it was over, they were glowing. Pride. Accomplishment.
Joy.
Elliot helped clean up without being asked. Pippa hugged me, actually hugged me. The twins fell asleep that night without a single argument. I sat in my kitchen after they were all in bed, exhausted down to my bones, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Margot had said I didn't do anything anymore. Like my life was empty. Like I had nothing left to give. But watching those kids discover themselves this week, I realized something. Teaching wasn't what I used to do. It was who I was. Retirement hadn't changed that. And when Margot came home in one more week, she was going to see exactly what I'd done. But what I didn't know yet was that her trip wasn't going as planned either. And the mistake she was about to make would change everything. Margot called on day 9. I was in the middle of teaching Elliot how to properly apologize after he'd snuck out to the diner the night before with his friend Soren. The phone buzzed on the counter. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "How's my brood?" she asked. "No hello. No how are you. Just straight to business." I could hear pool water splashing in the background. Laughter. The clink of glasses. "They're fine," I said, watching Elliot through the window as he swept the porch. His punishment. His consequence. His lesson. No tears? No drama? Her voice had that edge. The one that meant she expected problems and was almost disappointed there weren't any. "They miss you," I said. It wasn't even a lie. Tess still asked for her mama every night before bed. Good. Make sure they're not getting any sugar. And if someone gets into trouble, call me. Don't text. Call. I looked at Elliot again. At this boy who'd tried to sneak out at midnight thinking he was slick. Who'd come back to find me sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. Who'd expected yelling but got something harder, a conversation about choices and consequences. When you make a decision, I told him that night, you're also choosing what happens after. You chose to sneak out. Now you choose how to fix it. That's what being a man means. He'd cried. Not from anger. From the weight of actually being held accountable for the first time in his life. "I'll call if I need to," I told Margot. "And Mom." Her voice softened just a fraction. "Thanks for doing this. I know it's a lot." For a second, just a second, I almost believed she meant it. Almost thought maybe she understood what she'd asked of me. Then I heard her laugh at something someone said in the background. Heard her say, "Hold on, I'm just checking on the kids." Like we were an errand, a task to tick off her list. "Enjoy your trip," I said and hung up. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my kitchen and felt the exhaustion settle into my bones. Not the bad kind, the earned kind, the kind that comes from hard work that matters. Elliot had spent the entire day thinking about his choices. Not because I'd punished him, but because I'd made him think. Made him see himself clearly. Pippa had started asking me questions. Real questions. About my life. About teaching. About what it was like when I was her age. She was hungry for attention that wasn't just management. The twins had learned that bedtime meant bedtime. That rules weren't negotiable. That structure made them feel safe. And Tess had stopped crying herself to sleep. But the thing that stuck with me most was what happened that afternoon. Elliot's friend Soren had come over, the boy he'd snuck out with. I'd expected a troublemaker. Got a kid who was polite and scared and clearly not used to adults who paid attention. "Ma'am," he'd said when I opened the door. "I'm really sorry about the other night. That was my idea. Elliot shouldn't get blamed. That took guts. Real guts. So I'd invited him in. Let him help with the play the kids were still working on. Watched him and Elliot build something together, not just cardboard sets, but friendship based on honesty instead of rebellion. These kids weren't bad. They were just lost. Floating in a world of schedules and expectations without anyone teaching them how to be human. Have you ever watched someone discover who they really are? It's like watching a flower bloom. Slow at first, then suddenly beautiful. Drop a comment if you know what I mean. The second week flew by faster than the first. Maybe because we'd found our rhythm. Maybe because the kids had stopped testing me and started trusting me. We cooked together. Real cooking. Not the Instagram perfect meals Margot made for her social media. Messy, flour everywhere, laughing when things burned cooking. Pippa learned to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. The twins discovered they loved kneading bread dough. Elliot, shockingly, turned out to be good at following recipes. We fixed things. That broken shelf in the garage became a project. Then the wobbly table in the den. Then the fence where the neighbor's cat kept sneaking through. I taught them that things break, and you fix them. You don't just throw them away and buy new ones. Tess followed me everywhere. My little shadow. She'd hold my hand and chatter in her toddler language about everything and nothing. Sometimes I understood her. Sometimes I just nodded and smiled. But something happened on day 12 that changed everything. Elliot brought his phone to me. The one I'd confiscated that first day. "I don't want it back yet," he said. I looked at him. "Why not?" He shrugged. Looked at his feet. "I like this better. Talking to people. Building stuff. It's, I don't know, real." That night, after everyone was asleep, I cried. Not sad tears. Proud tears. The kind teachers cry when students finally get it. But while I was teaching these kids how to be human, Margot was making a mistake. A big one. And when I found out what she'd done, everything I'd carefully built was about to face its biggest test yet. Day 13 started normal enough. Breakfast. Chores. The twins arguing over whose turn it was to feed Sir Fluffington, the neighbor's cat who'd basically moved in. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Linda. The one who lived 3 doors down and knew everything about everyone. "Did you see what your daughter-in-law posted?" "I'm so sorry, honey." My stomach dropped. I opened my social media, something I barely used, and there it was. A video. Margot at some beachside bar, drink in hand, laughing with her friends. The caption read, "Finally free. 2 weeks of peace while grandma babysits." She was thrilled. Doesn't do anything anymore anyway. Bless her heart. The video kept going. Margot turning to the camera, giggling. We dropped them off at her place, and she looked so happy. Like we were doing her a favor. She's so desperate to feel useful. Poor thing just exists now. Her friends laughed. Clinked glasses. The video ended. 3,000 views. 200 comments. And counting. My hands shook. Not from anger. From something colder. something that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I read the comments. Most were supportive of Margot. You deserve this break. Grandmas love babysitting. She's probably having the time of her life. But a few cut different. That seems mean. Did you ask her first? Calling someone useless isn't funny. I set the phone down, breathed, looked out at my garden where the roses were finally blooming after weeks of careful tending. The kids were in the living room, oblivious. Elliot was helping the twins with a puzzle. Pippa was reading to Tess. The house hummed with the kind of peace that only comes from real connection. And Margot had reduced it all to a joke. A punchline for her vacation friends. My phone rang. Harlan. His voice was tight with rage. Mom, I'm so sorry. I told her not to post that. I told her people would. It's fine, I said. My voice was steady. Calm. The eye of a storm. It's not fine. She's making you look like... Like what? Like an old woman with nothing better to do. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Let her think that. Let everyone think that. What are you going to do? I looked at the kids again. At the life we'd built together these past 2 weeks. At the small wooden bird Elliot had carved sitting on my mantel. At the paper boats the twins had made lining the windowsill. At Pippa's drawing of our family taped to the fridge. Nothing, I said. I'm going to let the truth speak for itself. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't planned. I recorded the kids performing their pirate play one more time. Got footage of Elliot teaching Soren how to use a level. Captured Pippa explaining to the twins how plants grow. Filmed Tess laughing as Sir Fluffington chased a ribbon. Just moments. Real moments. The kind that don't need filters or captions. I didn't post them. Not yet. I just saved them. Kept them close. Because Margot's video was spreading. By evening, it had 10,000 views. People were sharing it. Commenting. Debating whether it was funny or cruel. And I knew something Margot didn't. The internet has a long memory. And the truth always finds its way to the surface. When you underestimate someone, you better hope they don't have evidence of who they really are. Because what happened next? Margot never saw it coming. Margot came home on day 14, right on schedule. Walked through my door like a queen returning to survey her kingdom. The first thing she noticed was Sir Fluffington asleep on my couch. You let a cat in the house? The kids love him, I said simply. Her eyes swept the living room. The paper boats. The hand-drawn pictures. The wooden bird. The costumes hanging from the coat rack. Signs of life everywhere. Real, messy, beautiful life. What did you do to my children? Her voice had an edge. Elliot came down the stairs. Hair messy. Wearing an old shirt with paint stains. He looked different. Lighter somehow. We had fun, he said. Grandma taught me to fix things. We did a play. Made stuff. I learned to take responsibility. Margot's face went through several emotions at once. Surprise. Confusion. Something that might have been jealousy. You let them damage things? Who's paying for whatever they broke? Things break, I said. We fix them. That's the lesson. Pippa emerged from the kitchen, flour on her nose. We made bread, Mom. Real bread. From scratch. Want to try some? You fed them gluten? The twins ran over, not to their mother, but to me, wrapped around my legs like I was home base. Mama, Tess squealed, finally noticing Margot. But even she didn't run to her immediately. I watched Margot's face. Watched her realize that her children had found something here they weren't getting at home. Something she couldn't buy, or schedule, or manage. They'd found connection. We need to talk, Margot said, voice tight. Alone. I almost said yes. Almost followed her to another room for a private conversation where she could spin this however she wanted. But then Elliot spoke up. Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I just need to talk to Grandma about. About that video? Pippa asked. Her voice was ice. Margot froze. What video? The one where you called Grandma useless. Where you said she doesn't do anything. We saw it, Mom. Everyone saw it. The silence that followed was the kind that breaks things. Heavy. Sharp. Dangerous. I didn't mean, it was just a joke, Margot stammered. Was it funny? Elliot asked. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Older. Harder. Was it funny to make Grandma sound pathetic? She taught us more in 2 weeks than... He stopped. But we all knew what he'd been about to say. Margot's face went red, then white, then red again. Get your things. We're leaving. I don't want to go, Tess said quietly. Me neither, one of the twins added. We're leaving. Now. They gathered their things slowly, reluctantly, each one hugging me goodbye like they might never see me again. Margot didn't look at me, didn't say thank you, just herded her children toward the door like she was escaping a crime scene. But as she reached for the handle, I spoke. Margot. She turned. Her eyes were wet, angry, scared. They're good kids, I said. You just have to see them. She left without responding. The door closed. The house went quiet. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because while Margot thought she could just erase those 2 weeks, the internet had other plans. The video exploded overnight. Not Margot's video. Mine. I didn't post it. Linda did. My neighbor who'd seen everything. Who'd watched the kids transform over 2 weeks. Who'd recorded them playing in my yard, building things, laughing. She'd put together a compilation. The kids performing their play. Elliot fixing Soren's bike. Pippa teaching the twins about plants. Tess kissing my cheek. All set to gentle music with a simple caption. This is what doing nothing looks like. By morning, it had 50,000 views. By noon, 200,000. By evening, it had gone viral. The comments poured in like rain. This grandmother is amazing. Those kids are so lucky. Margot should be ashamed. This is real parenting. News outlets picked it up. Local first, then national. Grandmother turns babysitting into life lessons. Viral video shows true meaning of family. Someone found Margot's original video. Put them side by side. The contrast was brutal. Her laughing about me being useless. Then footage of me teaching, caring, transforming her children. The internet wasn't kind. People dug into her social media. Found endless vacation photos while claiming to be a devoted mother. Found perfectly staged family pictures that looked more like advertisements than memories. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict swiftly and without mercy. My phone rang constantly. News stations wanting interviews. Strangers thanking me. Old students reaching out to say I'd changed their lives too. But the call that mattered came 3 days later. Mom. It was Margot. Her voice was small. Broken. Can we talk? She came alone. No kids. No Harlan. Just her, standing on my porch looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I'm sorry, she said before I'd even opened the door fully. I'm so sorry. I let her in. Made tea. Let her cry at my kitchen table while I sat quietly and waited. I thought I was a good mother, she finally said. I thought schedules and rules and the right brands. I thought that was enough. But watching that video, seeing my kids with you, they were different. Happy. Real. She wiped her eyes. And I realized they're never like that with me. Because I'm always managing them instead of seeing them. I'm always trying to make them fit my life instead of making my life fit them. I sipped my tea. Let her talk. That video I posted. It was cruel. It was unfair. You weren't doing nothing. You were doing everything I'm too busy to do. And I'm ashamed. Shame isn't useful, I said quietly. Change is. She looked at me with red eyes. How do I fix this? You start by being human. By admitting you're wrong. By learning. She nodded. Pulled out her phone. Right there at my kitchen table, she posted an apology. A real one. Not a PR statement. Just honest words about how she'd failed to see what mattered. How she'd taken me for granted. How she'd confused managing with mothering. The video got 500,000 views in 12 hours. The comments shifted again. Softer now. More forgiving. People love a redemption story. But words are easy. Actions are what matter. And what Margot did next proved whether she'd actually learned the lesson. 6 months later, Margot came to my house again. But this time she came to learn. She showed up with fabric and thread and a humble question. Will you teach me to sew? We sat at my kitchen table. Her fingers clumsy. Her patience thin at first. But slowly she learned how to thread a needle. How to make small, careful stitches. How to fix something instead of throwing it away. This is harder than I thought, she said after an hour. Most worthwhile things are. The kids came over that weekend. Not because Margot needed a babysitter, but because they asked to visit. They brought their wooden birds. Their drawings. Stories about school. I watched Margot watch them. Really watch them. Not managing or correcting or scheduling. Just seeing. When Elliot showed her the shelf he'd helped fix in my garage, she cried. I'm proud of you, she told him. And meant it. When Pip explained how photosynthesis worked using a drawing she'd made, Margot listened instead of interrupting with facts from her phone. When the twins argued over a toy, Margot didn't immediately intervene. She let them work it out, guided them, taught them. And when Tess climbed into her lap and said, I love you, Mama, Margot held her like she discovered treasure. It wasn't perfect. Margot still struggled. Still reached for her phone to Google solutions instead of trusting herself. Still got frustrated when things got messy. But she was trying, really trying. One afternoon, months after that first sewing lesson, she asked me something that caught me off guard. Do you forgive me? I set down my teacup, looked at this woman who'd called me useless, and learned she was wrong. Forgiveness isn't something you earn once and keep forever, I said. It's something you practice. Every day. Through actions. Through change. Through choosing to do better. She nodded. I'm trying to practice. I know. I see it. The lesson I'd taught wasn't about revenge. It was about redirection. About showing someone a better path and letting them choose to walk it. Margot could have doubled down. Could have blamed me or the internet or circumstances. Instead, she'd looked in the mirror and chosen to change. That's the thing about quiet justice. It doesn't break people. It gives them a chance to build themselves better. 2 years later, I watched Elliot teach his younger brother, Margot's 6th child, how to carve a wooden bird. Watched Pippa help with dinner without being asked. Watched the twins include their new sibling in their games with patience and kindness. Watched Margot sit on my porch, sewing a hem on a jacket, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because she'd learned that the work of loving people isn't always Instagram perfect. Sometimes it's messy and hard and requires small, careful stitches. Thank you, she said one evening as the sun set over my garden. For what? For not giving up on me. For teaching me what matters. I smiled. The same smile I'd given her that day on the phone when she'd said I didn't do anything anymore. You're welcome. The moral isn't complicated. Never mistake quiet for weakness. Never underestimate people who've lived long enough to learn patience. And never forget that the best way to teach someone isn't through cruelty or revenge, but through showing them a better way and giving them the grace to choose it. I'd retired thinking my teaching days were over. Instead, I taught the most important lesson of my life. Not to children in a classroom, but to a grown woman who'd forgotten what it meant to be human. And in the end, that was enough. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever been underestimated or learned a hard lesson about what really matters, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. And remember, the quietest voices often teach the loudest lessons. Don't miss our next story. There's always more to learn about love, family, and the courage to change. See you in the next one.